Story 1. I am fine with donating my organs, but I work for an estate planning law firm. We have a standard question about donations in the wills we make for people, and the main reasons I have heard for choosing no are, I do not think they would want my body anyway, I have had cancer, so I do not think I can donate, and I want my body to be whole in the end. It is part of my religion, or I am old-fashioned. Story 2. My cousin fully believed that if paramedics saw you were a donor, they would not try to save you. He went on to be a nurse, too. He used to work at scenes of accidents, and I had to point out that most of the time, I don't think paramedics are going through your wallet to see if you're a donor or not. They're trying to save you. Story 3. I have some health issues that are not well understood, and some countries recommend we do not donate organs until more is understood. So, I do not want anyone to have my possibly diseased organs. Story 4. That one Reddit post somewhere about someone's grandma being donated to science, but only to have the military use it to test explosives. Did some digging and found a related post. Story 5. I am an organ donor, but even I got squeamish when they asked if I wanted to donate my eyes. I did end up saying yes, though. It's a disconcerting thing to think about. For some people, body integrity is important even after death, particularly for religious reasons. Story 6. I'm a doctor, and the most prevalent excuse I've heard from people that aren't donors is that they're afraid their care team won't try as hard because they want their organs. It's like they're convinced I'll run into some issue mid-surgery and be like, hey everyone, this guy is a donor. Let's just call it so we can harvest those organs. Story 7. I worked in organ procurement and testing for a few years and never met such greedy, morally bankrupt vultures in all my life. I'm still an organ donor, but I get why most healthcare professionals aren't. It's an industry in desperate need of reform. Story 8. Story time. I am an organ donor but have reconsidered my choice. I am a hospital physician, and a physician assistant I work with, whose attending is an intensive care unit doctor, had someone come in with a cardiac arrest and anoxic brain injury. He was revived and on a ventilator. When the family came in, they said, he would not want any of this. Please stop. Minutes before the physician assistant performed a terminal extubation to allow him to die, another family member mentioned he is an organ donor. The organ donor team was called, but it was a holiday weekend, and they said he must be kept alive for 3 days until their team could arrive. This was a moral injury to the physician assistant, but his attending deferred to the transplant team. Unfortunately, in those 3 days, his mental capacity improved enough that he was breathing without the ventilator but not conscious. At this point, it was too late to allow him to die, and we can't kill him to take the organs. So, he must now suffer until he aspirates or develops a wound that causes him to die from sepsis. Story 9. I had seen an instance 5 years ago where a close friend was placed on life support. The doctors were trying to convince his wife to take him off life support because he had no chance of recovering. She was told his body would save a dozen lives. She declined. He eventually was able to come off life support and is still alive and has regained all functions. The hospital was Tampa General and is a very well-known hospital for organ transfers. Story 10. As a nurse in an intensive care unit, I am a huge proponent of appropriate organ donation. However, like many of the doctors and nurses I work with, I have removed myself from the organ donation registry because a lot of the tactics in use today are ethically disturbing. I think the general public still assumes that organ donation only occurs with brain death situations, and where there is tissue donation after death, such as corneas, for instance. However, times have changed. Donation after circulatory death is a well-intended option for harvesting organs from patients who are not brain dead. The original premise was that nothing would change in the process of transitioning from medical treatment to comfort-focused measures to a natural death. Then, after that process had been allowed to occur without interference, the organ procurement organization would quickly harvest organs after death. This is no longer how it works, not even close. Most organ procurement organizations in the United States have moved to what is called registry donation after circulatory death, which means if you check that box on your driver's license where you likely assumed you were agreeing to brain death donation or postmortem tissue donation, the organ procurement organization can now step in when a decision is made to withdraw life-sustaining treatment and transition to comfort-focused care. They can instead force you to remain alive using often aggressive and tortuous life-sustaining treatments, typically for a number of days while they do their workup. Your family has no legal control over this if you check that box. I'm all for being an organ donor in the appropriate circumstances, but I've had to watch too many families watch their loved ones suffer, often with some level of awareness of that suffering, and be unable to enforce my wishes. Story 11. Not going to be a typical response. Trauma. Mom passed when I was much younger and I did not understand the concept of organ donation. She had an open casket funeral, and I did not recognize her due to how many extra fluids they had to put in her body once the organs were removed. I've only wanted to be cremated since then. Story 12. I told this story on Reddit before, but this was my extended family's experience. My cousin was 9 years old when he had a stroke. He was sent to the local children's hospital where he was in a coma for about a week or so. The treating doctor really pushed my aunt to pull the plug at the time, like really pushed to the point of arguing that he would never wake up. She ended up changing doctors and decided to keep him alive. Well, he ended up waking up and recovered mostly. He does have typical stroke symptoms, but overall, he is contributing to society. School, work, and now married. This was back in 1997. By this point, I'm pretty sure medical procedures have changed, but the thought stays with most of my family why we don't do it. Story 13. My aunt used to work in a field where she witnessed the whole process of harvesting organs and tissue from a body. The organs are harvested first, and then other tissues are taken over the next 24 hours. These include corneas, skin, bones, tendons, valves, and blood vessels. Watching the bodies being surgically picked at until there was nothing useful left disturbed her enough that she revoked her donor status. Story 14. Well, there's this story. But aside from that, I will not be donating my organs because I have had to deal with this after a family member had died. When I used to think about organ donation, I pictured my liver or heart or whatever going to someone who needed it. The reality of organ donation is harsh. It's kind of undignified, and you don't actually get a lot of say in what happens to you or your loved one. A grandparent had just died. The organ procurement organization obviously needed to act fast as they're fighting time. They sat us down really quickly and started this invasive interrogation. It was to figure out what organs would be useful or not. Just really personal questions related to her health and lifestyle. There were comments about her sex life, drug use, and everything under the sun. They started really breaking down why certain things would be useless. They finally settled that she was obese so they could use her skin. Then they made us sign paperwork. Felt disgusting. It's a freshly vulnerable moment of grief, and they're haggling your loved one's remains right in front of you like they're a car being sold for parts. Felt like something you would see in a movie. Story 15. I am a funeral director. I was an organ donor until I saw what the process entails. The organ donation process is rather gruesome, between skin being shaved off down to the fatty tissue, long bones, arms and legs, being removed and replaced with polyvinyl chloride pipe, and the body effectively being reduced to and treated like a husk. I think if people saw how the sausage was made, they would be less apt to go for it. At face value, it is barbaric and makes the embalming process look totally mellow by comparison. In the United States, hospitals are required to report deaths or imminent deaths to organ donor services. If someone isn't pre-registered as an organ donor, a representative calls the family within an hour or two of someone's passing to ask if they can harvest organs. I understand it is a time-sensitive process. However, there is such a thing as being tactful and delicate in requesting approval from a family. Adding to this, they make the process sound as minimally invasive as possible, to the point of lying or misleading families. They make it sound as though the organs are going straight to helping a small child with some terminal illness. Once, while transporting the deceased back to the funeral home, I asked a staff member at the regional donor service what the economics of organ donation was and where the organs go. I was stonewalled. It depends on who's asking. Are you with a news station? It took me a minute to realize he was 100% serious. Anecdotally, and on a separate occasion, a family was once asked if they would be okay with organs being shipped out of the country. You would think that the staff performing the procedure would have some sort of medical license. They do not. In fact, they don't have any special certification, credentials, or education specific to their line of work. It's all on-the-job training. They may have worked in a medical or science-related profession in the past, usually peripherally in the loosest sense. That said, organ donation is important, and there is a greater demand than supply. I can totally respect and appreciate the argument of, I'm dead. I don't need them anyway. I know people whose lives have been impacted positively through organ donation. Perhaps it's an occupational hazard. Perhaps it's because it's the antithesis of what I do in restoring a lifelike appearance to someone. I just don't trust the process at all. It's not for me. I'm sure I'll catch some heat for this comment, but that's my 2 cents. Story 16. I am not a donor, and it's because I do not trust the integrity of the United States healthcare industry. Now, that's not me saying doctors will let me die on the table to get my organs, because I do not believe that. But I know the family waiting on the organ is being driven into bankruptcy, one $38 ibuprofen at a time. So, while it's illegal to purchase or pay for an organ, I firmly believe those costs are padded in elsewhere. Until such a time that our healthcare stops being for profit, I will take my organs to the crematorium with me. Story 17. The current organ donation system is messed up. I know of 2 celebrities that received organs when they did not meet the criteria to receive them. Money counts. Last time I looked, you had to show proof of ability to pay to even get on the transplant registry. Kidneys and corneas are the exception. Kidneys are federally subsidized. I'm donating my body to the local medical school. They graduate exceptional doctors. As to taking organs before you are dead, you have to meet the accepted criteria for death, usually brain death, before they even start talking about donation. Story 18. Because I am an intensive care unit registered nurse and I have taken care of many brain-dead patients while the organ harvesting process happens. It is a business and it feels very unpleasant. We call the donation company vultures. It has made most of us revoke our donor status. Story 19. My dad died very suddenly from an aneurysm and was pronounced brain dead in the hospital. He was always a huge advocate for organ donation and not a particularly sentimental person. He always loved the idea of donating his organs to help others and in support of science and research purposes. I never in a million years expected that we'd actually end up in this situation, as he was a very healthy individual without any previous history of health problems. While my family and I remained committed to respecting his wishes for organ donation, the process of the donation has made me decide to remove myself as an organ donor. Just imagine, in one of the worst, most shocking moments of your life, you have to listen to someone list every single one of your loved one's organs, like eyes, skin, bones, and vessels, asking for verbal permission for donation. It's an absolutely brutal experience on top of an already traumatic loss. Watching your mom bawling while signing off on your dad's organs when you've barely even had any time to process that he's actually gone. I know the immense, life-changing impact that organ donation can have, but the process of donating was so painful, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Story 20. Not Jewish, so I'm not sure why, but I have always had a strong feeling that I want to be buried intact, not embalmed, and in a wooden coffin within 24 hours of my death. Story 21. I don't have a deep philosophical or traumatic reason, and no one should have to. I don't like people referring to those reasons as excuses. I am a doctor myself. It's my body. I spent my whole life until now working with and for it. I came out with my body. I'm going out with it, and no one's taking even a single hair from me. I won't take anyone else's either. Story 22. Because I have a completely irrational fear that I might be incorrectly pronounced dead and then have my organs harvested before I can be resuscitated. No, really. I know it's stupid and still can't help it. Story 23. The box isn't checked on my driver's license. It's not that I don't want to donate my organs. It's that I want it to be my family's choice. Checking the box takes the choice away from your family, legally speaking. Checking the box is a legal promise that organ harvesting companies will use against families if they don't want to follow through. Story 24. I saw the documentary of the Danish teen that they said was brain dead and wanted to use to donate, and then she woke up. Until questions are adequately answered, I'm not donating. Her name is Karina Melchior if anyone is interested. Story 25. I am not an organ donor. I wish I had a logical reason to give you, but it's mostly spiritual. I don't like the idea of being buried with my organs missing. And I also don't like the concept that parts of me could be functioning and living out in the world within other people way after my expiration date. Story 26. I am an intensive care unit nurse and worked hand in hand with the organ procurement company in my state. They were some of the rudest, uncompassionate, and vulture-like people I know. I remember vividly withdrawing care on an 18-year-old who would not have a meaningful recovery but was neurologically still intact. The company wanted to speak to the parents but would not step out for this conversation. The family did not even want to speak to the organ procurement company, but they forced themselves into the room. They asked the mom and dad for their kid's organs with the kid wide awake next to them, crying. It haunts me frequently that my poor patient died, and those were some of the last words he heard.